Okay, I just wanted to show you the difference between an unloader and a regulator and how to turn an unloader into a regulator. I personally put all these on all of my truck mounts, and there's a couple of reasons why I do that. Number one, they generally have a higher pressure rating, but that's not why. They also have a higher temperature rating. That's one of the reasons, but that's still not the main reason I use them. I'll get to that here in a little bit. What an unloader does, generally used on pressure washers, is when you're not using the water, there's a check valve in here that snaps shut and allows the pump to bypass with no pressure on the head. Whereas on a regulator, if you have this set at 500 psi, you're not using your wand, the pump head is still bypassing under 500 psi. Not in your bypass line, but the pump head itself, the pressure side, is still holding under 500 psi. This is pretty much what's done on all carpet cleaning machines, and there's a couple of reasons why you don't use these the way they come. If that snaps shut, your pump is bypassing under zero pressure. You might think that's a great thing, and it is. However, what happens is in your heating system, whether it's a heat exchanger, a diesel burner, a propane burner, whatever the case may be, it cannot regulate backwards. So as the water in there is heating, it's building its own pressure. So it can kind of get out of control, and you need it to not be an unloader at that point. You want it to be able to regulate backwards. So all you have to do on an unloader to make it into a regulator is remove this check valve. Now there's a lot of different brands and companies that make unloaders, whether it's Cat Pump, General Pump, PA Pulsar. This is a Mechlin VRT3. That is my favorite one. Very commonly available, and you can buy these online from any number of places for around $60. Very reasonable. Whereas a PA Pulsar from a large carpet cleaning supplier, you may end up paying $120. So guys, shop around a little bit. On this one, what you can see on an unloader, the inlets and outlets are marked, and that's because of your check valve. So you've got an inlet here, and an outlet here. These ports, there's two of them on the top, are marked bypass. So either one of these can be used for your bypass, going back to your pump or back to your float tank, back to your fresh water tank, wherever you're going to bypass back to. In order to turn this into a regulator, you remove this, your outlet nut. I've never seen one that didn't have this. There's a little bullet and a little spring in there. That's your check valve. Then you just put this back in. On this one and on all the other ones that I've dealt with personally, you don't have to thread tape this or anything. That little O-ring does all the work for you. Seals it right back up. Tighten that back up. You need to cinch it back on there, but I'm not going to do that right now. Now, on a regulator, this is the main reason that I switched over to using unloaders. No matter how many times you tell someone, things happen. So if your machine is running and there's any kind of pressure behind it, even garden hose pressure before the machine is running, if you loosen this a little bit too much or it rattles loose while you're cleaning, the insides of it are going to blow out. So this will come off, your spring will come out, your little top hat will come out, and this little piston in here will also come out. So you walk out to your van, you've got water shooting out of the front of your pressure regulator, and you're going, okay, what's going on? So while you're out there on your hands and knees trying to find all these parts in your customer's driveway or in their yard or in their gravel, even worse, you're losing time. And it happens, guys. It happens all the time. But I just want to show you how these kind of go back together. This one's a little bit unusual. It came off of a name brand machine, so it's a little bit different on the inside than most, but very, very, very similar. You're always going to have this little piston in here. People call it the bullet. It's got a little ball bearing pressed into the end of it. That piece goes in first. Press that back in. Then you've got your little top hat here. This one is a little bit unusual the way it's made, but most of them it's very obvious the way it goes back in. This one has that little ball right there that sits on that. So that goes back in. Put your spring back on. This one also has a top cap, which a lot of them don't have this. Some do, but not very many. Put that back on. Put your threads back on. or thread your handle back on, and you're off and running again. So hopefully you can find all the parts. This one, on the other hand, that cannot happen. So you can see, I'll show you what's going on under here. We've got this little yellow cap, and right there, there's a little spot where you can get a screwdriver and pry that little cap off. Inside of there, you've got a nylock nut. Okay, that's to help prevent this from coming off. Also, it helps if you're going to set a certain pressure and leave it there. You can tighten that up and this cannot come loose. So even if this comes off, a lot of times when you get these new, that nylock nut is screwed on there a little bit too far, so it's difficult to turn the pressure down as far as you want. So let's say you want to turn it down to 250 psi, but you can't. It'll only go down to 400. You just take off that cap and loosen that nylock nut a little bit. You really don't even have to have that on there, but I would recommend leaving it on there if you can. I've already loosened some of this stuff up just for the sake of the video, but we can go ahead and take off this nylock nut. Let's just say that fell off, and let's just say that this rattled itself loose, and it fell off. And this little washer goes on top of that spring, and your spring fell off. Guess what? It's still going to work. You're just going to be at about 225 psi. That's it. No water shooting out or anything. So another cool thing about these while I'm at this point is that if it does start leaking at some point, or it's not operating properly, you don't generally have to replace the whole thing. The only time you'd have to replace the entire thing is if it froze or if the body of it cracked. So what you can do, just leave it in place. And this entire stem right here, again, I already loosened this because they're tighter than the son of a gun when you first get them. You can just remove this stem. And this is basically the entire operating part of the unloader. You take that out. They also make rebuild kits where you can replace these O-rings and stuff. To me, it's kind of a pain in the butt, so I don't do that. But you can just take the stem out of your new one, put it in your old one, screw it back in, put your parts back on. Spring, washer, handle, put your little nylock nut back on, which is a little, there we go. Put your cap back on, and you basically have a brand new unloader. You don't have to replace the whole thing. Anyways, I've had a lot of people ask me about that, and how they work, what they do, and what's the difference. That's about what I can tell you about it, and hope that helps.